Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be here. Although we are in a crazy world with a lot of challenges, we have as well a lot of positive and hopeful things that we can actually go and do. This is one of the new series of interviews. This one with Marc Buckley, a person we deeply respect, and as well that has a biography and a profile that speaks for itself. So this is a series of interviews we're doing with citiesabc.com platform. So citiesabc is a platform to unite and make a collaboration marketplace and ranking platform for cities worldwide, but as well creating a social impact movement that actually can create a Magna Carta for cities and for citizens worldwide. We are conscious that in the times we're living, especially with coronavirus taking over the world and shifting all our social habits and different things, we need more than ever a message of hope, a narrative of hope. And that's the idea of this interview with Marc, that is a person that has been an activist and looking at some of the things, some keywords: futurist, advocate for United Nations Social Development Goals, a consultant and advisor, as well as a global food reformist that has a book coming, as well part of the World Economic Forum network, and as well sustainable, focus and futurist on that level. So the interview will be looking at the biography of Marc. Will be around 40 minutes, and we'll be tackling all these areas and the different things that we think are relevant about this. So Marc, thank you to come on board and to be part of this group, and as well to give us your time. It's an honor.
Thank you for having me here. It's nice, Dinis, and to everyone else. Thank you.
So to start, and I think I would like to start with the basics, or the basics. So I think, could you give us a bit of your life history, starting as a child and going to your education?
Boy.
not all the details, but I think it's always good to go a bit. How do you became who you are? I think it's very important.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I'm a big fan of big history myself, and so my big history is one of starting out as a global citizen. My father's American, my mother is German, my grandfather was German, and my grandmother was Austrian, and many aunts and uncles were mixed between Italy and France and Spain. And from a young age, I was already a global baby or a global citizen, traveling around the world and learning different languages and speaking different languages, and time spent between the US and Europe mainly. I grew up half and half between the United States and Europe, and mainly southern Germany and Austria. My family were the owners of 6 generations of Germany's largest organic farms and Europe's 3rd largest organic farms. And one of my aunts married a gentleman who had hydroponics agriculture in his family of 3 generations. And when they passed on, one of my cousins took that over, but as a little, not as a little, but as a young adult, I worked on the nurseries and in the hydroponic farms as well as the organic farms. I have degrees from several universities: Singularity, MIT, Bucerius Law School, University of Phoenix, University of Utah, Salt Lake Community College, Colorado, Rocky Mountain Institute in Denver, Colorado, and probably a few that I'm forgetting. I'm an adjunct professor at several universities. I work with Berlin School for Sustainable Futures, Potsdam Institute for Climate Change, also with the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network. With I like to see that Yu was on the call, and he mentioned that he's alumni of Columbia. which is a Columbia University, and Jeffrey Sachs, who runs that organization for the UN, and probably many others that I'm forgetting. I currently living in Hamburg, Germany, but like I said, I'm a global citizen. I travel quite a bit, do a lot of carbon offsetting and educating organizations and international organizations around the world, and do the innovation hub for World Economic Forum, as well as expert for climate change, social innovation in agriculture, food and beverages. And for the United Nations, I work on 3 different projects, the Sustainable Development Goals, the Resilient Frontiers, and the digital ecosystem for the Earth. It's a geospatial compilation of digital tools for the Earth. I've spoken at innovative conferences and emerging technology conferences, and I'm a big global food reformist. I've lived in many different countries and states throughout the years, and owned 17 businesses myself, and currently own 4. Just so happy to be here. One great thing is for me, this COVID is very sad that we're in this situation as a planet. But for me, I'm busier than ever. I've been working in the future for well over 10 years. Not only the humans of new work, but how you do and conduct business on a global basis with family and businesses and partners around the world. And so besides not being able to travel on a plane and being confined, not much in the day-to-day activities has truly changed, because I've been using the tools and been acting in the future. And those leaders that I'm affiliated with and that I know, their businesses are still opening and running, and they're still finding themselves in a position today to help others in need. They're providing respirators and tools to make sure that our world continues to run, and those people who are suffering and having struggles now, that they can get those tools and the help that they need. It'd be nice for us to show the rest of the world how we can get them up to speed and live in the future, because it can be really nice and it can be really resilient and secure to live in as well. One last thing is the big history of Marc is I was one of the first 50 people trained by Al Gore as a climate speaker in his ranch in Carthage, Tennessee. I have mentors and friends like William McDonough, who wrote the book Upcycling and Cradle to Cradle with Michael Braungart. Michael Braungart lives here in Hamburg, Germany, and they're the front runners of the circular economy thought process. Ellen MacArthur, Dames, I'm part of that as well. Fritz Hof Capra, Professor Fritz Hof Capra, who wrote the book The Tao of Physics, and the book The Systems View of Life, is a mentor and someone who I've attended his courses on the systems view of life and systems thinking, and how by using systems thinking and emerging technologies, we can solve the global grand challenges of our future. And I think that's about it, unless you think there's something I missed.
No, it's wonderful, and your biography is amazing, and as well your work. So I would like to start with one question related with your work with the United Nations, specifically with the United Nations Sustainable Goals, which you as well we were writing and part of the people leading the process. So can you tell us? Let's start with that, because I think that's particularly important, and it is something that is on the epicenter of everything you're doing in your work about sustainable goals and sustainability and development. So can you get us a bit of overview? How do you see the United Nations Sustainable Goals, and especially in our world that we have, and as well your work with the United Nations on that level?
Sure. So All 17 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are a people, planet, peace, protection plan. They're an insurance plan, not only goals, targets, and indicators to get us safely to 2030, to keep our planet below 1.5 degrees of warming, but they're all tied to agriculture, food, and beverages. More importantly than that I think most people kind of didn't understand or weren't aware of, is the world's first ever global moonshot. As people using emerging technologies, as us, we deal a lot with futuristic thinking and innovations and dealing with how we get to the future. Well, I want you to know, for the first time in our world's history, 193 countries came together for the first time ever, unheard of, unprecedented, and agreed on the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. You, having been working along with the UN, being inside there, have seen that it's hard enough for 2 countries to decide where they're going to go to lunch, let alone 193 countries decide on a roadmap, an action plan, an insurance plan for our future of how we're going to get there. And all agree that they're going to do it. That is the world's first ever global moonshot. It's a historical, unprecedented event. The time before, the only moonshot that the world's ever done wasn't a world event. It was by the US when John F. Kennedy set the mission for us to go to the moon. Now, you can call this a moonshot or earth shot or a planet shot, but it is an historical precedent. And it happened 5 years ago. Now we're 5 years and we're just starting to hit the exponential curve. We're just starting to get the ball rolling and understand how to look at them, how to view them. The Sustainable Development Goals, when they were launched, and I'm sorry, I have to apologize, they weren't presented to us in the proper way. They're colorful, laid out from 1 to 17, very linear and lateral. We didn't know, are they for companies? Are they for countries? Are they just colorful numbers? What do they mean? How do we apply them to ourselves? How do we understand them? Well, I'm telling you, they're all a system. They're all tied to food. And when I tell people I'm an advocate for the SDGs, they're like, oh, great, I like number 1. It's red, my favorite color. No poverty. That's the one I work on. I say, great, that's fabulous. I'm so excited you've heard about them. But I want you to know it's virtually impossible for you to pick one sustainable development goal and work on that and not touch on the others, because they're all tied together as a system. So if you were to pick number 1, red, no poverty, it's virtually impossible not to touch on zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, life on land, life below water, climate action, and sustainable clean water and sanitation. It's impossible because they're all tied together in a system, and many more. So there's, like I said, all 17 are tied to agriculture, food, and beverages, which is the lifeblood and energy of every human being on Earth. And for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, I wrote the manifesto. And the reason I wrote the manifesto is, one, because a lot of people hadn't heard of it. They didn't know how to look at them. But I wanted people to get a vision, a feeling, a hope, something that if they closed their eyes or thought about when they read the manifesto or when it was heard, that they could envision what a future would look like by 2030, what that world would feel and look like if they reach that, and what kind of benefits it would bring them. Because without that vision, that medium, that understanding of what our future could look like if we reach the goals, then it's kind of hopeless. And most of the views, especially today, are very dystopian. We don't have very good media that shows us a nice, beautiful future, something to engineer, to architect, to create, design, or build for as a coder, something that we can reach in the future. And I think that narrative and those stories really need to change to something more positive that give us all a vision. I sent you a couple copies of of the manifesto, and I normally would read it to you so that you can see that, but maybe you can release that with a video or later. But I thought I would tell you that's kind of the work that I do there with the United Nations around the SDGs. But then I'm also working on the digital ecosystem for the Earth. It's a compilation of geospatial data areas and infrastructure and governance around that, with a lot of UN interagencies, a few World Economic Forum agencies, Microsoft, and the geospatial area from Google, and many others are constantly coming on board every day to bring that together in a form of distributed ledger technology and emerging technologies as one source, as a collective that's decentralized for everybody to use and secure and have some governance to it. And then the other one is one project that I started in last year in February in Songdo, Korea. It's called Resilient Frontiers. It's the step and iterations, what happens after 2030. So from 2030 to 2050, after that point in time, we're going to have other goals and a roadmap and a vision, and that vision is really strongly based on emerging technologies and resilience. And that's why it's called Resilient Frontiers. And COP25 in Madrid last year in December, we launched, as the UN, we launched the Resiliency Lab or Resilience Lab, and had done the turnover to the interagencies. But the thought process, the modeling and the projecting that we did for this roadmap from 2030 to 2050 is based on UNESCO and the UN's foresight modeling, the backcasting that was used in the Sustainable Development Goals, and also a real moonshot type of a framework. So how can we make sure that we have a resilient, desirable, sustainable futures for us all to live in going forward? And so those are three projects, and I'm extremely excited about, and I could probably do thousands of other projects, but I'm only one octopus that can do so much. But I believe in that systems view of life, that in order to solve global grand challenges of the future, we need to address many different facets and apply many different technologies that all work together in harmony as a system in order to solve those global grand challenges. I believe and know that is truly the way. And in 2018, all international organizations, the UN, the World Economic Forum, World Trade Organization, WHO, all switched to systems dynamic modeling, transformational maps on their websites, on the SDG interlinkages, and many others, this way of systems thinking to solve global grand challenges, because they realized that that linear, lateral, siloed approach at solving grand challenges wasn't working anymore. And that's why I truly like what I see so far about Cities ABC, is that it's really got systems thinking behind it. It's dynamic, it's very integral, where you can create several types of scenarios, get the data and the input, find what you need to get that complexity that we need to truly understand the problem, but also then to apply and use those solutions to solve the problem. So as you can tell, I can talk for hours, but I think off of that one question, I hope I've answered it properly.
No, it's amazing, and so picking on that level. So I think, especially you are a futurist as well, and you've been looking at present and future. So how do you see, and probably looking at the bridge, because of course we have right now a substantial issue related with geopolitics. Of course, right now as well, we have the alarming numbers of what is happening with coronavirus. And of course, there's people like us that are trying to come up with a better narrative. I think the narrative is critical. But the challenge is, how do you take, for instance, I had a meeting previously to this one, where we were talking actually with a partner of ours, and he was saying that most of the people, and I think if you see the US government, the perception of the general population is like the I mean, put it this in a sensitive way, it's like they understand the language of 14 years old, okay? So the challenge is that what I've been finding right now, and I think probably you have the same perception, work with governments and with a lot of complex problems, is that we have the complexity of all these solutions that we're building, and as well coming up with something that can actually create change. But then we have the general perception of people that is like a 14 years old capacity of digesting data and different things. And actually, to be honest, if you look at pure data, digital transformation capacity, we are probably only 5% of our population have that capacity. So from the problem, and this is the problem because this is creating a huge dimension right now. For instance, if you look at the growth of the economical issues that are coming out of coronavirus, especially if you look at the world economy deficit, which is around between $275 trillion to $300 trillion. And then the world economy is around $80 trillion. And then the last couple of weeks, we have incentives of around 10 to $15 trillion being put in the economy. But then we have this that, for instance, I just received a PR from the Chamber of Commerce of the US that 1 in 5 business will close in the US. So how do you see this kind of fantastic goals that we are all talking about to really making it happen? Because I think the problem right now is that if we don't really make this happen, we might get the Order Futurist a very dystopic world. So I would like to have your view, because I think you're doing more than most of the people in the planet. But right now is how we go from this kind of helicopter view to make change, because that's the challenge, is that the change is still not happening. And although, like you said, there's a lot of positive things happening, at the moment what people are seeing is panicking and, of course, losing jobs. And of course, I'm not even talking in emerging markets. For instance, it's where the situation is much more alarming. So how do you see that from your experience in different angles?
So I like to take the overview perspective, or this cosmic perspective that you're mentioning, the helicopter perspective, but I really believe that the solutions come from the bottom up, from those who are suffering the most at the bottom layers. And so now we've got them and put them in a situation where they don't have a resilient infrastructure. And now where our healthcare systems around the world globally and our infrastructures are not very resilient, we have a pandemic like this come, or the SARS or any other one that we've seen in the past. And instead of just a hiccup, it turns into a pandemic, and it turns into something very serious. And by no means do we not want to take it serious and not have the due respect for the people who are impacted and being affected by this. But I can also tell you that if the infrastructure of our world was resilient, and if people had good health and quality education and well-being, if they didn't have exorbitant pandemic numbers of obesity, pandemic numbers of asthma, pandemic numbers of diabetes, if their health wasn't already at a suppressed, or their immune system wasn't already doing bad, then when something like this comes, they would be more resilient. They would be able to bounce back. And secondly, if the infrastructures of our hospitals and our cities were more so of that of the future, prepared with enough supplies, with enough renewable energy and sustainability in place, then that's the ticket right there. That's the key of making it through something like this. And so I want to give you an example, and I mean it with all due respect. Those people who are futurists, those people who are leaders, those people who are still operating and functioning today, those are also the people that we know of that have been working in the future for a long time. And they are the ones who are helping us worldwide with not only monies, but with digitization and respirators. I mean, Elon Musk gave FDA approved respirators. He makes electrical vehicles and is going to space. Why is he doing respirators? Well, because he's a leader, he's a futurist, and he cares deeply about humanity, and he wants to help in a time of crisis. And he knows that on a dime, the world's industry can be changed and turned to be used to create resilient infrastructures, to jump into place, to create masks and respirators, and those things are needs. But who are those people? Those are entrepreneurs and futurists who've been working that way for years, that have different business models working towards the future. Now, those businesses that are probably going to go out of business and not exist according to this US structure, I don't know who they are. I don't know if they're needed. I do know, because I come from global food reformists and I'm a food activist, that in the food industry, the farmers and the servers of food and those businesses, they've been affected. It's unbelievable. They're closed. They're delivering meals and doing all sorts of stuff. They've been hugely affected. But I want you to know that they can have a job, they can have the basic benefits and the needs that they require, if for one problem that we've had for a long time, the agriculture, food, and beverage industry is 12,000 years old. It's the world's oldest, longest, most successful economy in the world. It's our basic energy source, and I want you to know that in the last 250 years of the Industrial Revolution, we've seen 6 innovations in the agriculture, food, and beverage industry. And now I want you to tell me, when a pandemic or crisis or that resilience infrastructure is needed in a time of need, where is it? What's happened? Well, we don't have the innovations. We don't have the technology. We're not running on blockchain and distributed ledger technology to have food security and to know logistic chains and all those things that are so needed. And now we're panicking about those people. Now is a time with the COVID to take a pause and not go back to an old economic model or to old systems and do bailouts that are proven not to work, or just to create another bubble that's going to pop. I think it's important we keep our economy afloat long enough to transition and to do a reset to something that will work globally for everyone, that it will ensure basic needs and resilient infrastructure. That is truly the key. And to bring in some of these much needed innovations and securities for the agriculture, food, and beverage industry that is desperately in need, and the city's infrastructural needs. Most cities that we're talking about in Cities ABC and in the world, they were all built up and founded on a basic principle. They were started with agriculture, food and beverages, and farming, and the food was in the middle of those city centers and built up around it. Today, we've pushed all of that to the outskirts and to the industrial area, making it difficult for those processes to come inside. And we need to really merge those two worlds together and create some resilient infrastructure so that when this comes again, and it will, we'll see other pandemics and other issues arise, that we have a resilient infrastructure based upon clean tech and emerging technologies, that we will still be able to have energy, food, water, and the basics that we need to survive tomorrow. That we're not miserable because we've been locked up in our house with our loved ones, that we're happy as heck because we're operating differently. We're working and thinking and acting in the future, and in the future we want to live in. We're not stressing about the basics. And that big problem really, there's no big finger to point to anybody, but it is the governments of the world that are poorly prepared. And they now can greatly look to our entrepreneurs and those innovators of the world, because I believe we have the solutions and we can help you ramp up, just like Elon Musk helped Australia with their battery powers, and many others have helped in the past. The biggest contributor to the UN is Bill Bill Gates, by the way, and he does wonderful things. And so I really think those are some key messages of hope, and we will get through this, and we will get you some better food and some better health and infrastructure in the future so that you can really live in the future in a different way. That be hopeful, be optimistic, don't be depressed or worried. We're going to give you some images of hope, and this is still the decade of action. We're going to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and this year took off on an exponential roadmap already with trillions coming online to meet the numbers and the financials that you spoke about in the beginning of my question that you just asked me is, where does that money come from? How do we do that ramp up? Well, for every monies that are invested towards sustainable development goals, towards sustainable development and resilience, there is an exorbitant return. We need to reach the goals by 2030, 94 trillion US dollars. That's a little bit more than $6 trillion a year. And we're a little bit behind, but I can tell you, regardless, business as usual by 2030, if we just continue on the same path we are, and we have hiccups and problems, and we just, when a building gets dilapidated, we tear it down and rebuild it with a high carbon scenario with fossil fuels. Regardless, by 2030, we're going to spend 89 trillion US dollars. But to have a sustainable future and do it in the sustainable development way or a low carbon scenario will cost us 95 trillion US dollars. And every business, and Unilever was one of the first to come out with this, but there are numerous businesses that have now come on board and applied the Sustainable Development Goals, the targets, the indicators, and that thinking into their business models, into their reporting, and into their actions, more importantly. And those companies that have done it are saying there's a 12 trillion US dollar return every single year. That's more than $6 trillion needed to reach the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. But there's all sorts of benefits. And I've heard numbers way up into 24 trillion US dollars, 48 trillion US dollars. It depends on the different sources and where they come from. And there's numerous examples out there. I just spoke about SDG and your business models and reporting to the GRI and the ISO about your sustainability in your company. And there are so many benefits because it's a better business model. It's a more efficient model. And the example that I've given you a couple of times now, if you look at Elon Musk, his gigafactory is still running. Why? Because it's automated, it's mechanized, it's digitized, and the distance between his employees, besides in the engineering office or maybe administration, is more than 2 meters distance because they're running and programming robots. They're doing things that are worthy and intelligent of somebody who's building batteries and cars. And not only he, but his employees are working in the future. They're still working, and the majority of that's automated. Jeff Bezos, Amazon, most of those are chaotic warehousing with robots picking and packing packages and things out, putting it into a box. And if that is done, those people are still working. And then they hand it to the delivery driver, who's one driver with a mask and gloves and still delivers the product. We need to think differently. How can we work in the future? How can we change the models so that, because our world has got to continue to function, but it has to continue in not a dystopian way, but in a resilient, desirable future, and one that works for us all.
So Mark has a question on food, but I just want, probably it's a bigger question. So Mark, get your question, because I have a bigger question on that level, because I think my point, and before we go to the food part, because it's a very specific part that I completely agree with you. So my question, and then we pass to Matt's food question, is, so if you look at history, okay, and I think, like you said, there's a lot of positive examples, but we have a massive perception issue in the world economy and the world society, okay? And until we didn't solve that perception pursue, we're going to start having this geopolitical increasing meltdown. And as well, at the moment, we have not just the geopolitical meltdown, we have a disparity of populism governments, and some of them with very bad principles. And we have as well kind of a chaos and actually right now a panic in the world economy and the world society. So if you look at history, probably the element, I would say that if you look at the achievements of looking at Professor Harari and a lot of studies, historians, if you look at when we have a big acceleration of technology or development, normally it comes with a period of less development and normally retrocess. Okay, you saw that, for instance, with the Roman Empire, when they advanced massive and suddenly the Roman Empire just melted down completely. And then we went to the kind of the Middle Age, which were initially the Dark Age, but it actually was not so dark, thankfully. And it was as well, from the Middle Age, we got kind of the inception of the city-states, which ran most of the first 500 years of the beginning of, probably actually the first 1,500 years of the Christian era that we're living were actually partly city-states that emerged, and then after the Renaissance we got states that start taking over. So and as well, a lot of the cities have their own sustainable agriculture and as well food chains.
They had wonderful infrastructures and very technologically advanced, so to say, with their infrastructure, their way of thinking, the way of logistics, and the way the cities were set up. I totally agree with you. One thing that most people forget about, so we hear a lot about the hominids or the hominin, the 8 other close relatives of Homo sapien, like Homo erectus, Homo neanderthals, that are no longer here before. And why aren't they here? Because they are our closest relatives that had language and tools and had family structures and traveled together and lived together. Why aren't they here? But one thing that we don't hear about is, what about those well over 12 ancient civilizations, civilization frameworks and structures? You mentioned on one, the Roman Empire, early Mesopotamia, early antiquity, the Greeks, the Aztecs, Mayas, Incas, the Roman Empire, Greek Empire, the Chinese Empire, and I could go on. They don't exist anymore. They're not here. And I'm not talking that far back. It wasn't that far back, and they're not here anymore. There's nothing left but ruins of those civilizations that we go and take a selfie with on vacation. But what does that history tell us? Those more than 12 civilizations that no longer exist here, all but 2 had a complete collapse because of ecological or environmental problems, because of infrastructural problems. The other ones, they're saying that it could have been a conflict between cultures and that's why they don't exist. But now we're in a global world, and just because we have great technology and we're global, we could face a collapse. I mean, COVID's showing us how quickly things can slow down and shut down and affect us all, not only financially, but period. And so we really need that big history lesson. We really need to think differently. We need to think how those stories of our past aren't being repeated in the future. And so I say something often: the definition of insanity is repeating the same thing over and over again, hoping for a different solution, or that you'll come up with something different. It's actually Einstein's problem theory. The thing is I'm kind of not worried, but I'm kind of not too excited to hear that the US is going to print more money and do another bailout, basically. I think it's much needed. I believe we need to keep our economies afloat, make sure people don't die and get hurt, but we don't want to go back to that old system. We want to reset for something new using emerging technologies. And I mentioned this to you yesterday, and it's very applicable that hopefully people will get this in their minds. because I spoke briefly about moonshots. Buzz Aldrin was the pilot, the captain that flew the Apollo mission to the moon and safely brought it back. While he was there, he got some moon rock, and when he came back and safely landed on Earth, he used the latest emerging technologies and computing power to get safely there and back, going to the bathroom in a suit, breathing in space, living in the cold, dark depths of space, and he made it back safe. And then he had to fill out a handwritten, typed paper customs declaration for his moon rock. Then he had to fill out a handwritten, typed, and signed travel voucher to be paid. The guy just used the latest emerging technologies, computing power to get there and come back safely, do something that is an incredible world feat. And now he goes to an analog system that doesn't communicate with the rest of the world or anything else for customs and that. That's the same thing we're experiencing today. We're not in the digital revolution. We're not up to speed with our exponentially growing world. And we need those two systems to communicate to each other so we can solve global problems and quit going back to old systems that don't work, that have been proven time and time to burst and not function. And that's exactly what you, Cities ABC, is doing, and many others who are using emerging technologies. They're thinking what global systems that are decentralized, secure, trustless systems that you don't have to say, oh, do I trust Mark before I use his system? No, this is a trustless system that is secure, that will lead us into the future of how we can solve these problems and still quit wasting time and saying, oh, well, is this the right system? Is that the right bank to go to? Is that, that doesn't work. That's not working for humanity. And the current civilization framework, the global framework that we're in, is not working for humanity anymore. And that's why we see this disruption, this feeling of collapse, this feeling of worry, because people don't know what the future feels like and what it looks like. They don't see the leaders of nations emerging to guide us through this safely.
Yeah, completely. So, Matt, you have a question on food, and I think that's a very important thing.
It was kind of on one of your first ones, but for the resilient infrastructure for cities, especially in the food aspect, you see that becoming kind of a hyper local aspect where you have community gardens, where you have let's say the gardens on top of the food safety on top of the buildings, where you can have drones and hydroponic systems. Do you see that becoming more of a hyper local resilient framework for the food security of cities?
I think that's one tool. Thanks for your question, Matt. I think that's one tool or facet in our toolbox. I believe there are so many options available for cities. So there's controlled environmental agriculture that we could put into buildings, skyscrapers, parking garages, spaces within cities where it's a closed system that works on hydroponics without soil and artificial lights, so LED lights, and they use a nutrient film technology that's organic to create food. But I think we need to take it a step further. So that's one tool. There's also aquaponics. There's also rooftop gardens. There's green rooftops. There's solar rooftops. I believe that our biggest need as human beings, so Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is breathing, food, and water. And so we need to always make sure that where we live, food is close by, and that needs to be an integral part of cities and communities. There is a way, if you live in an apartment, to bring that into your house. You can do sprouting. You can have a vertical garden refrigerator, or kind of like it looks like a wine cabinet or a larger refrigerator, where you can have a larger vertical farm for a family in your house. You could have an ambient water harvester in your kitchen that's about the size of a coffee machine that pulls about 5 liters of ambient water out of the air each day, filters that with very little electrical need. You could have battery backup and a solar panel and a power wall in your house, or whoever it comes from in your house or your apartment, to kind of be this self-sustaining off the grid until your city gets up to speed with the infrastructure that we all need. So there's ways to do it at many different levels and many different facets to bring that back into the cities. And what it does is it creates resilient, desirable infrastructures for cities, a solid foundation. When problems occur, oh, it's okay. We have a great water management system. It's okay. We have a great renewable system. We have great battery backup. And we're producing food locally here that's healthy enough to sustain us in these times of hard need. We don't have that currently. We see pockets of it around the world and some great leaders. Matter of fact, Elon Musk's brother, Kimball Musk, is doing great with Square Roots and the kitchen. He's delivering tons of meals during this time, and he has these shipping containers that he's converted into these vertical farms and delivering food. So that is really important that we rethink how do we bring that back into the cities and create those. And there's numerous companies and innovators out there doing that. We just need to start applying it. It's not about who has the best system and how we're competing against each other as entrepreneurs. It's about how are we creating that infrastructure for the future of where we really need to be, so that when times occur, it's going to be okay. We've got a garden on the roof, we've got a garden in our neighbor's house, or we've got a closed system garden here. We're going to have food. We've got good water management system. We're going to be okay.
So coming on that, and I think as well, you're writing a book about food infrastructure and a lot of these areas, global food reform. So I think this touch, yeah. So this touch exactly for me the most important thing is because I think we are all in this call. We are all thought leaders and academics and people that are trying to change the world. But the challenge is that the world is, although we have fantastic examples, there's still a lot of things. How can we? So picking in your book and this part of the infrastructure, and you mentioned some things. How can we go deeper? And I think we have probably one more question after this, but this is very important. How can we go deeper with concrete things? And I think like step by step. And I think even the people that are listening to us, which I think our videos are reaching a couple of thousands of people, how can we act? Now everyone is at home. We can, I know that most of people are just panicking, but we need to create the narrative on that. And this is very important from your book and the infrastructure and the action.
So many years ago, I have a medical background, and there is this great analogy I like to use, and it has to do with Spider-Man. So when Spider-Man comes upon a scene of an emergency or a problem, the first thing he does is he kind of stands back and he puts his hands up and he kind of looks and he lets his spidey sense, these radar, he pauses and he looks and he assesses the situation so that he's not running into a burning building or into something where, there's some kind of a chemical or disaster that kills him. He stopped and paused and assessed the system. And then after he knows what's going on, he goes in there and solves it. And so I think that really right now we need to take a point in time to discern from all the fake news and all the panic and the fear. We need to understand the big history of our world, which we've touched upon here, that we really understand the big history of what this journey is that we're going on as humanity, and where is it leading? What is the current path that the future from Trump or Bolsonaro or Shea or whoever the world leader is, what does that path, where's that going to lead us to in 5 and 10 years when we reach what they're talking about? Or is it a path that's so uncertain you just don't know? And understand that big history, and then take this time as a pause to understand how we got here. So a lot of people don't even know about the COVID and what it is and how we got here and how it happened. Cities, agriculture, and people they're saying played a big part in this, and they think that in Wuhan, or Wuhan, however you say the province or the place in China, they think it was a wet market with maybe a bat that came into the wet market that was sold into food, and somehow either through pets or bats or food or people feeding that to them, that's how it started. But it has nothing to do with China. That's just a wet market where it occurred. What it has to do is much before that, where we're encroaching on environmental spaces where different types of species and animals besides human beings used to live, that have viruses and bacteria that affect our world. And now, because we weren't prepared enough, and because our health of a lot of our global citizens isn't that one that can bounce back quickly, because of infrastructures, because of the way our food and healthcare goes, we're now faced with this. And so what we need to do is not go back to an old system, take this time to pause and reset, be very positive about working in the future, what the future of work and life looks like, but also push forward the clean tech revolution, emerging technologies, and how we reach the future to create this resilient, desirable infrastructure. Solid infrastructure that works for everybody on the planet, where basic needs and resources are covered and secure, so that when this happens again, we'll say it's a hiccup. It's something that didn't affect us because we were prepared. We were prepared, and we listened, and we're going to make sure, because it's really about the future, our children's future, and future generations, to be able to produce those resources, to produce products in the future, to pay your people in the future, to have the type of work that's going to be around in these situations.
Yeah, completely. So probably I don't know if Professor you or Matt have more questions. I have just one, probably the last one. We are in 45 minutes, so probably we'll wrap up here, but people will be able to see more about you. So my last question, if Matt and you have some questions as well. My last question is, so looking at the people that are looking at us right now and listen to this, how do you suggest, like, especially for the peer-to-peer, because you are part of global networks and all of us, and as well the platform citiesabc is precisely to create a movement that anyone can use, at least get the data, owning the data, and get more resources, and eventually in the near future to be part of a marketplace. But how do you suggest movements or places where people actually can get information and can get involved? Because I think that's right now, people are all at home, and they could use their time and their space to start doing something. Of course, at least the people that are listening to us, and they will listen to us, but as well, creating a bit of a movement out of this, and a bit more positive movement to pick what you're saying from the theory to the practice, at least for people that are not part of these movements that we are part of.
When you're trapped at home, it's hard to see anything besides your four walls. Hopefully you're there with loved ones and people that you can speak to and collaborate with, and be pulled out of any feelings of despair or loneliness. I really believe that we take this time as a pause, as a time to rest, to rethink, to re-educate ourselves of what the situation we personally all are faced with, and where we live, and what our future would have been like had there been no COVID. What was the path that we're going on? If in the future we had a COVID incident, would we be in the same situation? Or could there have been things that we could do now, or could have done, to make sure that this time is a beautiful time, one of growth and learning, of continuing to work and continuing to take care of our loved ones, and to be in a situation, the best situation you can ever be in any crisis, is one where you're helping people to be better, helping people to get out of any problem that they're feeling out. What I've been doing my whole life since I've started this journey is to solve global grand challenges, to make sure that we don't have that suffering in the future, to follow the golden rule, to treat people and planet how we want to be treated. And so make sure that you have knowledge about the emerging technologies, that you have a resilient infrastructure in your life, whether it's your home, your apartment, your community, that you know where to get those resources to sustain yourself for that time, that you're well aware of the spots that you need to go to online and offline for help and resources, but more so that you put yourself in the future in a position that when a time comes that you have your own bank account, your own savings account, your own energy account that you can give back and help humanity, and that you have enough to resiliently make it through until tomorrow, to have enough food, water, and energy and resources for yourself. Now, Cities ABC is a portal where I would suggest not only cities can go to and individuals can go to for data, information, and knowledge to get this awareness, but I would like to push governments and city leaders to use this tool, to get in there and use it and update it, to support it with data, to use it for a tool to make their cities resilient and prepared for the future, and not just to go back to an old system and say, okay, we've got through this, we've done it, and now we're just going to go back to the old system and wait till something happens again. We need something new. We need something resilient and desirable, and that's in the beginning of this conversation, some of the things I'm working on. But it's not enough if I work on it or others work on it. We all need to work on it together and get on the same page of where we want to be in the future. And I think the best goals and guidelines of that are the Sustainable Development Goals. If you read the manifesto, or if you understand what that world could look like by 2030, it's a pretty good foundation of equality and gender equality and good quality education, health and well-being, no hunger, no poverty, and resources that we need to live and function, that now we can springboard off into the emerging technologies that we truly need to build stable resilience globally for us all. I don't know. I hope that helped.
No.
I can tell you it wasn't an easy question.
No, I understand.
I could answer it all day long with many different facets, but it was a difficult one.
I appreciate it, and it's very inspirational. So I think to wrap up, because of course we have 45 minutes of interview. So can you tell us where people can find you? I know that you're very present in social media, but the channels, and as well where they can read your books and your different things. Of course, we will put all the links in the interview, but I think it's important to hear from you and to wrap up.
Yeah, you can go to Marc, M-A-R-C, Buckley, BUCKLEY.earth. MarcBuckley.earth. There's a lot of information there and ways to contact me and to reach me there. And I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and many other places you can search, and just you could type in Marc Buckley, and I'm sure you'll see and find a plethora of things and information if you want to get a hold of me or ask a question, or just reach out to me on one of the social medias. I don't know where you're going to post this, and ask your question there, and I'll do my best to answer it. Those are all the places.
Yeah, could I ask for the Cities ABC project, would you suggest maybe we can work on some model that will create some index purely for the COVID-19? Because as you already mentioned that we already discussed, now the business world is in disorder, and especially when I recently helping the UK's National Health Service to for some of their emergent staff material supply, I found that the whole market broken. Okay. Actually, yesterday I'm talking to the commissioner, British Embassy Beijing, which is the deputy ambassador, John Edward, and he also recognizes broken market because the business rules seems not apply, and people who need the equipment, they cannot. The end users, the hospital could not get them, but the business people in the middle, okay, unethically, they keep them and to waiting for the price to increase. And all this create a big problem. The people dying every day, hundreds of them, but the business people, they trying to make huge money and waiting to the best time to sell them, because it's very difficult to ramp up medical equipment immediately, right? So in time. Yeah. So I just think if you could working with us, or you could use our platform to publish some 17 SDGs for COVID business practice or other things. I think that would be maybe very useful, valuable, to the society. That is the sustainable society itself of this. Yeah, that's just some of my own idea.
Yeah, I think that's a step in the right direction, and I'd be glad to contribute and help. One thing where I can see this, a tool, and I've run across this in questions in the last few weeks, is people have supplies, they have things that they want to donate or sell, or they want to get out there to help, and then they spend hours emailing and calling a number that's never answered, an email that's never answered, to trying to find out where they can go to give some help. And so it would be nice not only to have ABC, Cities ABC be a platform where, okay, well, here's where the resources are, here's where this person wants to help, and where do I go and how do I do that? How do they turn that in and connect those people? Because if you lose them in that initial process, when they're ready to help or when they have a product, and it takes them 2 days, a week to get in touch with somebody, and then it's the wrong person, it's done, it's over. People have died, and that is part of this infrastructure that we're talking about, this infrastructure that we need to change. We need something that is trustless, decentralized, an emerging technology like blockchain or distributed ledger technology that automates that. And it's, again, that's Buzz Aldrin thing, is these two worlds aren't speaking to each other. And that's when we have a huge breakdown, a huge breakdown. And so if we could use Cities ABC for that, man, that would just be fabulous. And to have it be peer-to-peer or open source, or people say, this is exactly where I could go. I live in London. This is where I'm going to go. This is what I have. I'm looking for this. Here's the situation. Let's get it resolved. Because there are infrastructures, there are systems and tools in place from governments around the world, but none of them are really speaking good to each other. None of them are really working at the best, most efficient level. And we need to change that. We kind of need to get away from that and have something that's more a trustless thing. Thanks for your question. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I agree that the blockchain is a technology to regulate this disordered business world at the current situation. And use blockchain. I was discussing with some senior business leaders in China yesterday, and to say that because this disorder is caused by the misinformation spread online. For example, some people, they may not have such enough equipment, medical equipment, but they claim they have it. Okay, so for the manufacturer, for example, they only produce 100 pieces of this ventilator, but the people, the agent, they all claim they have 100, so make up 10,000. So the information, who actually have what, so this should be on blockchain. It's not on their papers, on their word of mouth. So, but of course, this thing, I think really we need the technology, working with the government, inquire all the medical manufacturer or providers, they should apply this technology. Okay.
I think there's a lot of people out there who are working on that, and there's currently tons of hackathons going on where people are trying to come up with systems. I keep seeing Matt smile because I think he's probably a coder or a hacker, and he knows on how much this is needing, and probably can do some of the programming for us. I don't know.
No, I'm not the coder. I'm the evangelist.
Okay.
But you're aware of a lot of the resilient blockchain-based infrastructure that's being built to hack at COVID. One specific one is a really good application that I'll just mention here. Tony Rose is building a self-sovereign identity system so that you can, when you test yourself, you can do on a peer-to-peer basis, ensure that you know you're COVID-free, so you can go into nursing homes or go visit your grandmother or go into public infrastructure. So there's a self-sovereign identity way of ensuring that your health records are secure and that you can verify that you're free of the virus whenever you're thinking. So that's one that I was thinking of going, oh, this is perfect.
That's fabulous. That's great to hear. And I've heard of several others like that as well. So, I mean, IOTA's working on or IOTA, I don't know how you say it, probably IOTA, is working on some stuff. And there's numerous others. Odyssey Connect is actually my call next that they have. It's a big hackathon with trying to solve global grand challenges, all using emerging technologies, AI, blockchain, future technologies, the Oceans Protocol, Nature 2.0, things like that, to come together to get us to all solve these global grand challenges. And so for some people, we're speaking a foreign language when we talk about tech like that, but our world, I just want you to know, our world is growing exponentially around us, good, bad, and ugly. And we need those two worlds to speak to each other, to understand each other, whether we get it or not. We need some kind of added layer of help as human beings to keep us up to speed with our exponentially growing world, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. We need to keep up to pace with that, because if we don't, the problems that we experience as the calamities and those things are going to be so distant that we're running into the problems now. And that's what we want to avoid. We want to work in the future, the clean tech revolution, into the emerging technologies, the future of work, one that is not dystopian. It's a beautiful world that's resilient and desirable, that we can all enjoy each other, the world, and enough resources and abundance for us all.
This is the greatest decentralized collaborative effort humanity has ever taken upon. This is one of the first moonshots of the 2020s, is to tackle this virus program together. So the greatest decentralized collaborative effort ever existing in humanity, and we're a part of it.
I love it.
And you need to lead it. Thank you so much, Marc. It's been an honor and privilege, and I think there's a lot of ideas. So I know that you have your book coming soon. The interview, we're going to put your bio and link to all your websites. We appreciate your time and initiative, and as well your positive message and activism.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
The book's called Menu B. It's put out by 1.5 Media Publishing, and they are also the publishers of Innovators Magazine. That's a place that you guys can go to get free publicity and help on not only hacking global grand challenges in the COVID, but also to promote Cities ABC. Susan and Ian Robertson would love to hear from you and promote you guys, and also see that Cities ABC comes to fruition. Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you. So we appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you.